Hey guys, back again this week for midweek video. We're still in the first part of our series on discipleship and Christian discipline. And a lot of people think of discipleship, they think of, sort of the regular means of grace and prayer. But there's a lot also too that goes into discipleship as far as instructing people in the overall creation of God and the intention of God. And so with that in mind, we've introduced what is commonly called the creation mandates. So you find those in the creation of man in Genesis chapter 1, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue the earth. And then in the early part of Genesis 2, God rests on the seventh day and he hallows the seventh day. He makes it holy. And so it's a day of worship and it's a day of rest. And so those four: fruitfulness, we would say fruitfulness, family. When you think of multiplication, it's marriage and family. And then when you think of subdue, you should think of work, labor. Okay. And then also with the overarching theme of Sabbath, you should think of rest. So a lot of people compress these things together. I'll say that in just a minute in this video. And so I'm going to play a little bit of that for you. But fruitfulness is what we're going to talk about today. What does the Bible mean when it uses the word and when it tells us to go forth and be fruitful? A lot of people smash that together, the fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue, and make it kind of one thing. But if we take it apart, we find that to be fruitful is not the same thing as multiplying. So someone cannot marry and yet live a fruitful life, or someone may not be able to have children, for instance, and live a fruitful life. So multiplication or family, marriage and family, are not necessary to living a fruitful life. Some don't marry, some give themselves to the work of ministry, for instance, and not marry. They become, as Jesus says, they're eunuchs for the kingdom. So without any further ado, we're going to jump in here and look at fruitfulness and talk through a little bit of what fruitfulness means in the overall creation. How does that impact us? How should we think about fruitfulness? Let's listen.
It says we are to be fruitful. It's a command to be fruitful. A lot of people will smash all this together. Be fruitful, right? Multiply, fill the earth. But we're going to separate them because they're not the same in general. Like, you don't have to have a bunch of children to live a fruitful life. Otherwise, everyone who never marries or everyone who is sterile could not live a fruitful life. That's not what God is saying when he says be fruitful, right? Be fruitful then is that what we're not supposed to do is live in our parents' basement all of our lives. What we're not supposed to do is just be a person that takes up space. We're to be fruitful. We're to do, we're to grow, we're to mature. Fruitfulness is very positive. When we leave the earth, people shouldn't be glad that we're gone. I mean, I've been at funerals for very old people that people were generally not all that upset that they were passing away. They had lived a life that was unfruitful. They were bitter at the end of it all. Their children were bitter towards them. Their neighbors were bitter towards them. There were 5 people there, and all of them were there from obligation. That's not what you want your funeral to be like. You don't want people to show up because they're obligated. You want people to show up because they love you, because you loved them, and you lived a fruitful life, and you invested in them, and you gave them space, and you encouraged them, and you blessed them with your life. You're supposed to be fruitful in a positive way. We're not supposed to be sitting around subsisting, right? Just like a mushroom on some log, living some symbiotic relationship, robbing everybody else of everything that they're supposed to have in order to take up our needs. In other words, we're not supposed to be victims. Like a victimology comes from this idea that we're supposed to subsist and people owe us. No. You're not supposed to subsist, and no one owes you. You owe them. You're obligated. They're not obligated. You're obligated. You're obligated to be passionately loving and positive. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be a blessing to their life. I'm not talking about the power of positive thinking. I'm talking about the power of positive action, of doing righteousness in the earth. When we leave the earth, we should want people to show up because they love us. We shouldn't vanish as a cloud of vapor without a footprint or a legacy. This idea first occurred to me when my brother passed away. I'd just become a Christian I've been a Christian for about 2 years, maybe 3 years, probably for about 3 years at the time. Four, I'm sorry. So I've been a Christian for 4 years. And he had died in this terrible car wreck. And there was nobody, you want your mom to go and unpack the car and figure out what needs to be taken out of there. So I went, my stepdad went, we just popped the hood on his car, and there's like, I don't know, everything he owns is in a trunk. And most of it went to the dump. There was nothing. He had no children. He was never married. He had no bank accounts or possessions. He didn't own a house. We didn't have, he didn't have a will. He didn't need a will. When my brother vanished, he vanished. There was nothing. This is just pictures. That's all we have. It's just pictures. And I've always been saddened that it took me 15 minutes to clean my brother's trunk out, and that was all the possessions he had on the whole earth. And guess what? I've never ever seen any of his friends again. Those who wept the loudest, I've never heard from or saw ever again at his funeral. Never. They had no obligation to him. They did not love him. So this idea that we're supposed to be fruitful is very important to our lives. So many people are not living fruitful life. They're takers. They're not givers. And one of the things about being a believer and about re-entering into the plan of God, the plan of God is for you to be a giver, not a taker. The plan of God is for you not to subsist, but to do and to love and to bless. We're supposed to be fruitful, right? When a tree bears fruit, it has progressed through various stages of life. It's endured storms. It's endured withering heat. It's put down deep roots. It has come to the point that it can multiply itself, right? God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit, which you shall have it for food, right? The seed of the fruit is inside of itself. That seed falls off, the outside of the core goes away, the seed goes into the ground, and a whole new reproduced tree can come from that, right? A tree, someone who's fruitful, a tree that bears fruit is something that's endured storms and withering heat. It's been through various stages of life. It has deep roots, it has a deep taproot. It can reproduce itself. Fruit has the seed of the tree within it and can produce a whole new tree. We're to be fruitful persons, growing, enduring, maturing, faithfully building a legacy of good works to leave as evidence that we were here, that we glorified God, that we brought dominion. That's the command, to bring dominion, not as petty dictators, but as fruitful doers of good.
That's a good place to stop. A lot of people think fruitfulness is something that it isn't. Words that you should think about when you think about fruitfulness is you should think about mature. For instance, a tree or even a person has to mature to a certain state before they're able to reproduce naturally. So there are natural even forms of progression. One of the things that we've noticed with child rearing is there are certain markers that we look for as a child matures, whether it's walking and talking, and then later on more skills with hand and eye and things like that. And when they don't develop by a certain period of time, we begin to look and see if there's a problem. Same with our life and with the Christian life. The Christian life should bring progressive sanctification. It should bring maturing. And so if sanctification is part of the Christian life and guaranteed because we're being conformed to the image of Christ, we're being predestined to be conformed to the image of Christ. So that's a guarantee within the Christian framework that we're going to change. And so maturity, then going on to perfection, as the apostles would say, maturity is a very important part of the Christian life. So some synonyms as we close. So to be fruitful is to be a mature or maturing, is to be a builder. One of the things when I was doing student ministry for many years, I tried to come up with the very quick and easy definitions to where you can figure out if somebody had matured and was coming into manhood or not. And they were things like, children break things, adults fix things. So those were things I would talk about with students, especially we go on retreats and things would get broken. And I would say, I should be able to trust you. You're supposed to be a man, and I find you breaking things. That means you're a child. So I guess I have to treat you as a child. And we would have our relationship would be based on their immaturity. So when we look at these things, we're supposed to be fruitful. We're supposed to be builders. We're supposed to be contributors to our society. We're supposed to be producers. We're supposed to be productive. God did not make us to sit, but he made us to do. God is at work, and Jesus says, my Father's at work, and I look and I see where he's working. I can get in on his work. The Father is a worker and at work, and the Father worked. We're supposed to produce, and we're also just supposed to be improvers. So we're supposed to take things, and one of the object lessons I like to give in this is what's the difference between, say, a field and a garden, or a forest and an orchard. The only difference is order. That is all. We've taken in an orchard, we take certain trees, we cultivate them, we plant all of them in one, we put them in ordered rows, we order them together. A garden is the same plants that you find in nature that we actually just bred in certain ways and then place them in an order so we could track production. So all these things have to do with being an improver. So people, men are called, women are called, children are even called to be fruitful. And there's a definite sense in which fruitfulness is the primary or the fruitful one of these commands: fruitful, multiply, subdue, and worship. We've already said that you can be fruitful and not multiply, for instance. You can also be fruitful. You may be handicapped and unable to work and unable to subdue things in the same way that maybe others are, but that doesn't mean you can't live a fruitful life. And of course, you can worship God, so being fruitful and worship God are the two things that like all of us can do because of whatsoever state God calls us in. He gives us everything for life and for faith in that state and station. So we'll wrap up there. We'll jump in next week and we'll look at, we'll at least introduce the concept of marriage and family. And it'll probably take a little bit more explanation than that, but we'll jump in on that next week. May the Lord richly bless you guys. I hope this helps you become better disciples, especially if you're wondering, Lord, where should I put my emphasis? Where are some places that I need to look? If you're looking for those big block categories, the creation mandates, fruitfulness, marriage and family, labor, and worship. These are those big block categories to sort of start your investigation. All right, guys, may the Lord bless you. Bye-bye.